Rajni, what's wrong?
Tom, I have a script and I don't know what to do with it. Should I burn it? Feed it to my cat?
You need some writers group therapy.
Hello and welcome to Writers Group Therapy.
I'm Tom.
And I'm Rajni. We're writers helping writers. Ready for your session? The doctors are in. Okay, so I don't know. I think I was just having like a moment of nostalgia or something. But I realized one of my favorite shows, cartoon show, was actually really forward for its time. Did you ever see that old show, Jem and the Holograms?
I'm familiar with it. I probably watched it a little bit when I was a kid because I grew up in the 80s, but I don't remember it quite as well as you do, probably.
Well, yeah, I mean, you weren't the target group. It was meant for little girls. But like, okay, think about this. This is actually kind of mind-boggling. It was pushing diversity before it was a buzzword or before it was popular. So the basic premise, for those of you who haven't seen the show, Jerrica Benton inherits her father's music company when he dies, and she ends up running a music label and running a band, and she is dating a Latino guy, which I never knew that Pacheco was a Hispanic name because I grew up in the Midwest and we don't have a lot of Pachecos out where I'm from. So she's a white girl dating a Latino guy. There's a lot of interracial relationships. She's got a very diverse group of foster siblings as well because they're also in her band. So her foster siblings are a black girl, an Asian girl. She has a real biological sister who's white, and then they end up bringing in a Latina gal to be the drummer. And a lot of them are dating interracial couples as well. So the Asian girl is dating a white guy, things like that. They also are single mothers because they inherit the Starlight Foundation, which is this foster home for girls. So they inherit a bunch of preteen girls and raise these girls. So they're promoting diversity, interracial relationships, female-led companies, and single motherhood. And this was all in the 80s.
Wow, that's way ahead of its time, isn't it?
It kind of is. It kind of is. And I was thinking about this because I don't know if you remember this, but in the 90s, so like I looked it up, Jem ran mid-80s, like 85 to 88. In the early 90s, Dan Quayle, who was the vice president at the time, attacked the Murphy Brown Show, which is a live-action primetime show, because the main character, Murphy, becomes a single mother. And he was attacking it saying, family values, etc. But nobody ever attacked Jem, and they're raising like 6 12-year-old girls. Crazy, right?
Yeah, that was a major big news story when Candice Bergen, who played Murphy Brown, was attacked because she felt attacked personally as an actor for portraying that role too. Of course, if you're a cartoon character, you don't have a publicist to come out and defend you. So
they just would cancel the show. But it got me thinking: does it seem like it's easier to push a political or social agenda in animation than live action? And why is that, if that's true?
Well, when you told me about this topic, I immediately thought of the Gummy Bears, another cartoon from that era, where you just had a bunch of little different colored bears who all lived together and went on adventures. And I can't even remember what the villain of the show was, but the thing that stuck with me is they're all different, but they're all the same species, but they all live together and get along just fine. So that's kind of like, diversity and equality and living together and getting along. So it's just that they're bears instead of people. It also works, like with aliens or monsters or whatever characters you want, because they're already different in their very nature. You can already address the kind of the topic within the world without having to be overt about it.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that's interesting about Jem is they all have crazy candy-colored hair. So you don't even think about the fact that, for example, Aja, the Asian girl, she has blue hair. She dates a white guy who also has blue hair. So you don't even think about it. You're like, oh, okay, Rio has purple hair. So I think the fact that they chose in the design of the characters to give them these crazy, unnatural hair colors, it makes you think, I don't know, you don't see the racial stuff, if that makes sense, because of that.
Right. Japanese anime does similar things. Their characters have all kinds of crazy looks and hair colors and things, and it doesn't matter really. It's just helps you kind of differentiate which character is which in some ways.
Yeah. Yeah, but you're not looking
But
at
they
it
all
like...
have the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, they all have the same problems though. They have to deal with life's issues the same way we all do. It doesn't matter what color their hair is or what kind of animal or monster they are. And Monsters Inc. is a good example because here you have scary monsters, which when we're kids we think the scary monsters are bad, but now we're told that they're all just regular people. They just scare people for their job, at least in the original one. So then within that world you have the good and the bad, and they just happen to fall into, it doesn't matter. The scariest looking monster might not be the bad guy. It might be the more subtle character who is actually the bad guy.
Mm-hmm. Well, Pixar's very good, I think, at pushing social and political ideas very subtly in their films. I mean, and I love their films, so that's not a slam on them at all, but they're very good. Like we were talking about Wally, has very diverse themes of environmentalism, kind of a cautionary tale if you rely too much on technology, look at the fate of humanity because of it. And yet people got up in arms over, for example, Al Gore's film An Inconvenient Truth. People, were saying, oh, yeah, there's no environmental issues or whatever. But you watch Wally, you're like, oh, I can get behind that. Yeah, humanity's screwing itself over.
Well, yeah, Wally is the story of a robot in love. And the subplot is what happened to the Earth and what happened to the humans who left it, and are they coming back? But you're right. There's those stories about artificial intelligence. There's stories about environmentalism, consumerism, wasting, and losing focus on what's really important. The same kind of stuff happened in A Bug's Life. Here you have the ants, which are supposed to be the good characters, and then you have the grasshoppers who are the bad guys. And it's kind of about bullying and and being different and being accepted for who you are, and not walking with the pack, so to speak. And so there's all these great stories that happen here, and I think in the most part they teach us good things. But you're always going to find somebody out there who's going to look at it and say you're trying to push an agenda. And I actually Googled Wally, and there's it takes 2 seconds to find a half a dozen places where they're like, oh, this is environmentalist propaganda. This is trying to make kids think a certain way. And maybe it is, but as writers, coming back to the writing side of it, we all have positions, and we all have, our own, kind of causes, I guess you could say. And we don't necessarily write stories about them, but if you're writing a story about a world, it's going to fall in there somewhere. It has to, because that's just part of who you are. And so it's going to sneak into your story in some way. Maybe not on purpose, maybe subtly, maybe, for some things, maybe more overtly.
Mm-hmm. I think, though, with animation, because you have that extra layer of not even like a fourth wall, but it's fantasy right off the bat. These characters don't look like us. They don't, even if they are human, they're cartoons. So you have that extra layer of fantasy, so you can forgive, the agendas a little bit more. I mean, Zootopia, for example, which is a mainstream Disney film, has strong themes about prejudice and racism, and people have mentioned it in reviews and stuff about these themes. If they didn't pick a world of animals and it was a live action with people film, we might not have been as accepting. But everyone I've ever talked to loves Zootopia. It's gotten great reviews.
It would have been Crash if it had been humans. So, yeah. And then in, the adult world of animation, like Fox with Simpsons and Family Guy and then, South Park, those kind of cartoons, I think part of their success allows them to be more satirical or more controversial because they know they're not getting canceled anytime soon, so they can push it even more. So they really dig in with hard, issues of the day. And South Park, if you've ever seen 6 Days to Air, the documentary about making South Park, they show how they can literally in one week come up with a whole new show. So they can react to current events, and then they put it out there right in front for adults specifically, as satire to commentate on our daily lives.
Yeah, and I think the animation part of it makes it sort of allegorical versus, just what I mean. It's more palatable because it's kind of an allegory instead of, you actually held the mirror up and showed me how ugly I was, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they killed Kenny every week on South Park for the first couple of years. I mean, you would never do that in a live action show.
Yeah.
It just wouldn't happen, but it was a running gag. It was comedy.
Yeah.
And, and it was supposed, and they say right up front that their show is horrible, so nobody should watch it in their little opening credits, so. But, I think in some ways they do a great service, so, and I think all writers, in our hearts, we all want to do good with our projects. We want to open people's minds and hopefully, in some way make the world a better place.
Yeah. I mean, and that the killing Kenny thing is actually a really good point too, because in animation, think about it, even like your classics like Warner Brothers, Bugs Bunny and the Roadrunner, I mean, the characters are always dying or getting an anvil on their heads or a piano thrown at them or something. Roger Rabbit, Who Killed Roger Rabbit, touches on that, right? All the characters, they see stars or birds or whatever every time. You can't really kill a cartoon, right? So, again, that layer of fantasy.
They didn't kill Roger Rabbit, though. It was Who Framed Roger Rabbit. So.
I know, but, remember they keep dropping the safe or whatever on him in the beginning, and they're like, why aren't you seeing stars? You're seeing birds. It's the wrong thing. Obviously, if it was a live action thing, it's one and it's done, right? You throw the anvil on the rabbit and he's dead. So that layer of fantasy and that layer of allegory, I think, helps make any of those themes just easier to swallow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, and over the years, the shows have dealt with, all kinds of very topical issues, racism and discrimination and sexism and transgender, especially on South Park with the characters there. So, it's certainly part of our culture, and it's gonna come up everywhere. Whether it's an adult cartoon or a cartoon for the whole family, you're gonna have some of that in there, just because we're humans, we're writers, and we're humans.
Yeah. So, do you think overall, then, if you were trying to make a statement with your writing, animate it, don't animate it, how would you know what the best platform is for a piece?
Well, if you want to deal with a controversial topic and, nobody wants to make a live action piece out of it, you can consider doing, a animated version of it. Think about spinning the world that you're in into another world where it can be entertaining, but it can also give you a little bit more freedom to address a social issue in a more subtle way, and something that people will get but don't have to have beat over the head with. So. Comics are also another great way. Do a graphic novel. A lot of issues come out in graphic novels too. That's another way to bring stories to people in different, kind of media.
Yeah, that's a good idea. So what do you guys think? What's your favorite animated show or comic or movie or whatever that's really made you think? Tweet it at us at WG Therapy online. We're also found at writersgrouptherapy.com. And if you like what you hear, subscribe and share it with your friends. We'll see you next week.